Welcome, my constant reader friends. I'm Tad, and this is Tad Reads Books and Stuff. All right, we got another update. So, I finished Apollo 8. Yep, my first nonfiction read of the year, and we're going to talk about this. Just to give you an update, I haven't selected my TBR for May yet. So, you're going to have to wait till the next video to see my TBR because I still have to finish Agency, book 2 in the Peripheral series by William Gibson. And of course, we're starting Preacher for our next graphic novel in the Marvelous Team Up with Graz from the GKBC. So, I'm sorry, next week I'll have my TBR for next month. All right, let's talk about Apollo 8. Now, I don't know, it's kind of tough for me to do reviews or talk about nonfiction. I mean, really, it's kind of just a novel on the history of the Apollo 8 mission. So the full title of this book is Apollo 8, The Thrilling Story of the First Mission to the Moon. It's by Jeffrey Kruger, which has become kind of one of those guys that everyone knows for writing about space and the moon. His more famous book was Apollo 13, which coincidentally he wrote with Jim Lovell. Jim Lovell is one of the astronauts that was on Apollo 8. And with Jim Lovell, he wrote Apollo 13, which is a more popular book probably than this one. But let's get the numbers out of the way. This was published originally in May of 2017. My version has 292 pages. Currently on Goodreads, it has a 4.42 rating, which is very good. I gave it 4 stars. I mean, it's not a perfect book by any means. It's kind of weird. It does say the thrilling story of the first mission to the moon. Going to the moon for any human being, I'm sure, is pretty thrilling. But it wasn't that thrilling of a read. It's pretty dry for the most part. But I liked it because it's not a huge book. He doesn't get bogged down in the minutia of, let's say, for instance, NASA politics or the math and science behind a lot of, what goes into sending somebody to the moon, of course. But he does enough of it that you get the proper feelings. You can understand kind of the math that is given in this book. Again, not a lot. It's more of a retelling of what happened during this time period in an overarching view of the situation. So not too much minutia, thus, 292 pages. I enjoyed it. Now, yeah, I saw somebody mention it being like a school read, something that you would maybe be assigned to read in school. I think that would be appropriate, again, with the shortness and the style of writing, not being too overwhelming. If, you had some, 8th grader or something reading Apollo 8, I think would be a good read for them. So yeah, nothing taxing on the reading, but he touches on everything. He touches on the history of NASA, like I said, a little bit, but not overwhelmingly. He touches on the careers of these astronauts, not just the 3 astronauts that went up in Apollo 8, but some of the others. They go back and discuss like the families. They introduce the families, their children, things like that. Again, not just of the 3 astronauts, but a lot of the people that were, valuable to the whole NASA mission and the decision that they had to make to send these astronauts to the moon, maybe before we probably should have done it. Maybe before we had the technology ironed out the way we should. There were some tragedies in NASA. We had some explosions and some deaths. They don't really go into the Mercury history at all in this book, which I kind of would have liked to seen a little bit of it. They start with the Gemini missions. And I can understand why, because Frank Borman and Jim Lovell, two of the three astronauts on Apollo 8, were in the Gemini series of launchings as well. They were in Gemini 7, which at the time, they were the people that had flown the furthest ever in the history of humankind. So at least those two were, veterans of space travel. The third astronaut, Bill Anders, was not. He was a rookie, and because of him being a rookie, there's some hazing and stuff that goes on. There was some politics and some fun things going on, because some of these astronauts were Air Force, some of these astronauts were Navy, and they had, friendly rivals. There was Army. Most of them, of course, were test pilots. Of course, there's some fun stuff in here with Chuck Yeager and some infighting with him, and it was just a well-rounded book, I think, for anyone that has any interest in our exploration of the moon and space travel back in the 60s. Now, he does touch on here with pretty interesting political views. During the 60s, our country was not in the greatest shape. We had nuclear weapons proliferation. There was, discussions of that. We had the Vietnam War, of course. We had civil rights, the Cold War. We had assassinations, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. We had cities on fire. There were riots. Thousands of people actually were killed or injured in riots around our country at this time. So this was kind of something that could take, all of that away from America and give them something to cheer about. And it definitely did. I can tell you that reading this book, it just made me feel very patriotic, very proud, a lot of pride reading this book. I mean, there's some tears falling in some areas of this book, just for the feeling of pride that our indomitable spirit as Americans and explorers kind of drove this whole mission to the moon. Really interesting. The race, of course, the Cold War race against the Russians was kind of funny in some instances. The Russians actually had sent some bugs, some insects, some worms, I think some mice, to actually be the first animals from Earth to go around the moon. But we, of course, beat them in the space race, and that was a great, huge part of pride for me and Americans at the time. Really cool here in the front of the book. It kind of shows you the mission, what the spaceship, the Apollo here, where the three astronauts were, and the part of the ship that got them after they went around the Earth a couple times. Of course, we slingshot towards the moon. And a cool part of the book was when they finally crossed the distance where the Earth's gravity no longer had any effect on the ship, and suddenly, for the first time in the history of mankind, we were being pulled by the gravity of the moon. That was interesting to me. they circumnavigated, or I don't even know if that's circumlunated the moon 10 times. First ever humans to see the dark side of the moon. That was really cool. Tons of pictures that they took are historical. This book does have a lot of pictures. This is one of the most famous pictures here of the Earth, as you can see from the moon, as if almost you're standing on the moon. Very famous picture there. It's called Earth Rising, I believe. Yeah, Earth Rising. Really cool. A lot of pictures in here. Easy read. I loved it. There's some creationism versus religion in here, some debates, but not a lot. Nothing that would dissuade you from reading this. Easy read, really interesting. If you have any interest in the Apollo, I mean, it was huge for me growing up. I had pictures of astronauts on my walls. Those were my heroes when I was growing up, when I was little. So I don't know, it's nice to get back and read something like this. So pretty much that's it. Nice small book. Not crazy with, overwhelming you with math or science or anything like that. Just a really cool book to read. If you find any entertaining value in my little videos, please like, please subscribe, please leave me some comments, and hopefully we'll find out what I'm going to read next, my TBR next month. All right, until next time, peace out.